And I think we are live. Hello, Daphne. Welcome back for another episode of our Life, the Ultimate Choose Your Own Adventure podcast. What are we talking about today?
Oh my God. Speaking of choosing, we're going to talk today about choosing wisdom. What?
Can you choose wisdom? Isn't wisdom something that you have to earn? Isn't it something that comes only with old age? I mean, there's all sorts of weird concepts that go out there about wisdom. What is wisdom anyway?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think you're bringing up some really good myths, and we know that experience can be a very helpful teacher as well. It's funny, we were just talking about how you and I seem to go about learning anything, which is through problem solving. Typically, at least that's true for me. I have to have something that I'm trying to accomplish, I guess, in a problem. So wisdom probably fits in that bucket a little bit. Like I'm trying to understand how to navigate relationships, for example, or navigate all the things in this modern world, work, relationships. Maybe you have children. You probably had to learn some things about children.
A handful of things, although it would have been nice if there was a manual for that.
Oh, if only we had a life manual.
If only we could actually have 10 steps that we could take to add more wisdom into our lives.
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
All right, what stood out to you from our intro today?
Today, let the adventure begin. I think that might have been what stood out to me last week. I can't remember.
We didn't talk about it last week, which I was very much distracted by the awkward way that I introed the music, and I was inside my head.
Now, how did you feel about today?
Today was much better.
Yes.
It was very good. So, what stood out to me? Blending ancient wisdom with modern psychology. But given our topic today, I'm like, I wonder if we can actually blend ancient psychology with modern wisdom today.
Oh boy, that's really good. Ancient psychology. Well, some of it we might want to, and some of it we might not want to. I mean, don't make me get on my Freud bandwagon here.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I was thinking much more ancient than Freud.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because we'll talk about Buddhist psychology.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. For me, when I look at modern psychology, there is so much that is explained today that I think was very much figured out in the Vedic texts.
100%. And it was the Western world that really, that wanted to put the scientific rigor behind these things that seemed just to be assertions or based on people's experience. So the Western scientific method came along to say, hey, look, let's take a little bit, and we have philosophers to thank for that. At the same time, then we get into the argument of like, well, does everything have to have evidence behind it? I don't know. But there's a phrase, lack of proof is, or it'll come back to me. But lack of proof is, not proof of lack or something like that. It'll come to me in a second. But
I think I understand the gist of it anyway.
Yeah, not everything can be proven, Nevertheless, yes. So ancient psychology. Let's go with that.
Yeah, ancient psychology. That's what everything that I'm learning today scientifically that's documented and helping people. I'm like, that sounds a lot like what I hear from Stoicism. That's a very Zen way of thinking about and experiencing things. It's like this stuff was figured out thousands of years ago.
A lot of it really was.
Yeah.
A lot of it was. And, and then you put it up against, and this is what we're going to talk about today, because you put a lot of these things up against then our modern times in which we live. right? Where the context in which we're functioning has changed exponentially since, the 1800s, exponentially since the 1600s, so how do we what's still really true and relevant? And then how do we navigate this, I'll call it the modern world, the only world I know. How do we navigate that and still pull in this wisdom, which is really what the show is about? How do we, and I brought this up on shows before, for example, how do we navigate where we live in a more of a meritocracy, so to speak, like where everyone has the same opportunity, Cliff. You can be just as successful as anyone else. Well, there was kind of a benefit when it wasn't that way. We had a little bit more respect for luck in our life, and a little bit more respect for, well, I was born into this family and I'm going to stay in this family. So, there are things that we kind of have lost a little bit of understanding of, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what brings
because now if you're not successful, you're a loser.
Well, who gets to determine what success is and what a loser is? And I think that's a different topic for a different day.
It is. But it fits into this idea of being wise.
It does.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What made you decide to come up with a 10-step process of how we can become more wise in the decisions or the way that we live our lives intentionally moving forward?
Well, of course, my own life. And I thought about, when have I made choices that probably I would put into the less wise or unwise bucket? Very simple thing. Well, simple, I say, yelling and losing your crap at someone, like, is that a wise choice? I think we can kind of all, lying to people, and that becomes really nuanced, right? Is it, if you ask me, if I ask you, hey, does this dress look good on me? What's your response? So we get into all the nuance. And
what I thought I heard you say? Does this stress look good on me?
Does it? I feel like it does not. So, we get into all the nuance of those, but nevertheless, I thought if there was some sort of path, and it's funny that you brought up, Cliff, like, doesn't this come with age? And in a way it does. In a way, what I would say is there's this way we get into adulting in our life. I definitely have insights and things that I've learned. I'm not the same person now than I was when I was 20. Thank goodness, in many ways. And there has been life experience that's come along. But I just thought if I could write down a list of, like, here are some things that I've gleaned and I've learned and I've read that I've put into practice. I think that's the other big part of this that I put into practice. Some of it, which comes from ancient psychology, philosophy, and definitely from the Vedic, Buddhist approach, for sure. If I could put these things into practice, what would happen in my life? Would I experience more peace? Would I experience more calm? Would I navigate the world in a way that brought me into greater alignment with myself? And what would that do for myself and the relationships, people that are important to me? So that's where it came from.
I love that. One of the things that I think about when I think, what is wisdom? For me, as I contemplate that in real time right now, I'm processing my thoughts. What is wisdom?
Yeah.
I used to think that wisdom was acquiring a lot of knowledge. And the more knowledge I have, the more wise my decisions can be. And and also, I used to think that a lot of life experience adds to my wisdom. For me right now, processing this live, I haven't thought about this previous to this conversation right now.
Yeah.
I think wisdom for me right now has less to do with how much knowledge I've accumulated and how much life experience I've had. I'm not saying that those are not factors, but for me, wisdom is embracing that I don't know what I don't know. And responding from that attitude rather than reacting based upon my conditioned way of thinking, based upon what I have been taught, knowledge, and what I have experienced And my experiences have often been logged in my memory banks based upon my perceptions at the time, which are always limited. And so just because I have a lot of life experience doesn't mean that I am wise.
No.
And just because I have lots of knowledge and things that people have taught me and things that I have read and studied doesn't make me wise, because quite frankly, there's a lot of things that I thought I was absolutely certain from my own experience, this is what is true, that I now no longer see. I see it from a more broadened perspective. And there's lots of things that I've been taught that today everybody says, oh, that was before we knew this. And so for me, I think wisdom is more along the lines of not jumping to the conclusion that I actually know everything and that there's more to discover. And for me, a wise approach in my mind is saying, hey, I'm going to do the best with what I currently have to work with, knowing that my knowledge and my life experience is very limited compared to what I may not know in this scenario. But I'm going to do the best I can, not hypnotically, not automatically, not in reaction, but in mindful response. That's for me what wisdom is.
Yeah, I love it. Well, this fits right. It fits in with, we said steps. I guess I just 10 things. These are not sequential.
Oh, okay.
By the way, but just, well, I love that you brought up about just knowledge, information. I mean, how many, and this probably is less true for you because I know how you read books. I know how you take in information. There's a lot of practical application over there. Nevertheless, if I think about all of the things that I've read, all the information that I've taken in or been exposed to, how much of it have I actually put into practice compared to the amount? And we can, and I don't want to get too much into the semantics of words, but what came to me when you talked about knowledge is like, we can become really well-informed idiots.
Yeah.
Right?
The Dunning-Kruger effect comes into mind.
There it is. Exactly. So what I hear you saying is, it isn't just based on experience, because we can repeat and often will. This is step number 1, by the way.
Okay.
We can repeat patterns over and over and over again. And I think life in and of itself can be very friendly in some ways to let us see these patterns that can repeat if we pay attention to them, to call our attention. So I'll just talk about step 1, becoming wise, understanding and accepting the way that our past may be influencing our present and possibly our future. And what I hear you saying, Cliff, is that there's a way that you come to a certain curiosity, as do I, about what is showing up in your life, and a certain level of acceptance of like, hey, I was taught certain things. I call it our emotional inheritance. I was taught certain things. I was raised in a certain context in a certain way by certain people. I had certain influences, and those things can influence me. And if I attempt to apply all of that in every single situation and context of my life, it may not be setting me up for wise responses.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think that's sort of one of the first parts. And I want to tell you that people can, in my experience, people, and myself included, I remember when I first started doing a lot of my own work to understand how I was believing certain things or the patterns in my life. Like there was a real resistance to that, to not acknowledge that the past did influence my present, that it was influencing how I, the window, the lenses that I was looking through. There was a real resistance to that at first, because I wanted to believe that, I don't know, I think I just wanted to believe that I was in control of it all in the moment and that there was no influence there. In some way, probably. And having some respect for that and understanding that, I think, is one of the steps to go, there are some ways, things for people who have gone through traumatic events that are influencing me, that happened in the past. So how do I work with that? So I think that's the first one.
Yeah. And my experience with that is that every time I want to do something new that I've never done before, it's usually not an issue unless I bump up against fear, anxiety, worry, and doubt. Yes. And whenever those come up, one of the things that has been very helpful to me is journaling and self-reflecting. Why do I feel this way? Yeah. What is it what would I have to believe or what would I have to think to experience this fear, this worry, this doubt.
Yes.
And as I sit with that, all of a sudden, images of my past, the words people said, the way that I was judged, the way that I was excommunicated from somebody's inner circle, and the way that, all of the, it's like,
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is back in those days, I had those experiences and I didn't really evaluate the bigger picture of what was going on. I just made some rash decisions like, oh, when I do this, it means this bad thing. So therefore, I must always avoid doing this in the future.
Yeah.
And that's going like, so somebody recently says, Cliff, how do you handle it when you have this dream or vision of something you want to create, but other people in your life questioning it? They give you warnings about how all of these things could go wrong and that you don't have what it takes to succeed in this area. How do you handle it when people, it's like, well, normally I just cower in fear and get back into the pot with the other crabs into the boiling water. But through self-reflection, I'm able to go back and I'm like, okay, what was there wisdom in the advice when people told me, don't shut down your podcast and answer man business? Don't go and do this. Was there wisdom in that? Are there anything that I could learn from that? And yes, there was lots of valuable information. In fact, the fact that people told me not to do this because of some of the reasons they gave, it gave me these valuable things to look out for along the way and to navigate around. But my fear today was based upon that experience of when I was put out. Now, what happened was when my mastermind, the story is my mastermind group, 4 out of 5 men in my mastermind group said, Cliff, this is a very bad idea. Do not shut down your streams of income related to podcasting. And at that moment, I had a decision to make. Follow my heart or stay within what's the accepted, proper, responsible way to do business moving forward. And I will say that initially, I immediately felt myself wanting to stay in with what they suggested. Don't go outside of your lane. Stay in this lane. This is the profitable route. There's many more years of great profitability and wealth building here. And it's like, and this group is going to support me for that. And I was afraid to leave that because, wow, in the past, when I've gone against the advice of my advisors and my inner circle,
they kicked you out of the group.
They kicked me out of the group.
That's what was coming up for me when you've said this before.
Yes.
It's like, oh, this isn't just about them predicting your woeful future.
No, it was. It was when I chose to do something different than what the overall consensus had agreed. This is a bad choice.
Yeah.
Well, we can't support that.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, there was a phrase of a guy who back in 2008 when things were so terrible, I had admitted to a group of people. This was before my mastermind group existed, but I had a business advisory group from people that I knew that were more successful in business back when I first started. And things were so tight financially that I thought, man, it'd be nice to breathe a little bit more if I went and signed up for food stamps or food assistance for our family. And I was crushed by that idea. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like I should go back to my mom and dad, get my day job at the insurance agency, blah, blah, blah. I can't make it on my own. And I had all of these fears. And I sent this to this group of 10 people. And then all of a sudden they said, the first person who responded says, okay, Cliff, I've been supported up until this point, but this is where I draw the line. This is the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard of. And I can no longer, in good conscience, support your decision to continue down this start your own business path. I think you should go back and get your day job. Oh. And I'm like, oh my gosh. That is exactly word for word what's been going through my head. And I was about ready to pack it in until all the other people in the group responded. And the first statement from all of those other people were like, the first thing you need to do, excommunicate him from this group. And then the second thing, go apply for food stamps. This was made for you. You'll pay more in 1 month in taxes than you will ever take out of the system. Just go do this. But that was the opposite, but it's still that phrase, my past experience of this is where I draw the line. If you go against my advice on this decision, don't come to me for any further support because you've just demonstrated that you do not appreciate the advice that I give, the sage wisdom. Anyway, past experience influencing the current.
And a little bit of, what it feels like when you get kicked out of the group too, which is a little bit, not only just experience, but it's also sort of an evolutionary sort of part of our wiring that's like, don't be without the group.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think that's another part of one of the steps that I read in your thing. Yeah, it's somewhere in there. So go ahead.
It is. We'll get to. Okay. So the other part of this, again, everything you said in the beginning fits right in with this. We realize that our minds and thoughts aren't all that they seem to be. And we can't just will ourselves into things. I think this is the other part of it, is understanding how our past, our future, all these things get wired together. And it takes a minute. And I think this is where we lose compassion for ourselves. I do believe in my experience that change happens in a moment. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say more about that. When I intentionally choose, that is when change, the change is happening already. I do believe that in my experience and have had that experience. Nevertheless, there can be this path of also recommitting to those choices because our patterns, they start to show up, right? I'm imagining through the story that you just told, and even me leaving my corporate job, like, you've got a secure thing here. You're at the top of the hierarchy. Why would you want to leave? You're making great money. Well, I'm not really enjoying myself very much. Similar path. And you were with me through that whole journey. How long did that take to really work through? It wasn't about leaving the job. It was really about how I saw myself. It was really about understanding all of those patterns, understanding what was really even driving the desire to stay in the first place.
Right.
And getting underneath all of that. So just thinking that we can will ourselves into things, I think, is also a very, it's a misunderstanding. Yeah. Our minds are just not that straightforward.
There are two things that come up for me as you say those things. Number one, I have found a lot of success in willing myself into something, but only for as long as I can actually keep my focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
So I can force and will myself to do something, but if my identity has not changed, and I'll speak to that in just a second because it leads to the second thing that came up.
Well, that's what I was getting at too. Yeah.
So the thing is I can do anything as long as my conscious, focused attention remains hyper focused and fixated on that one thing. But the thing is there is no new habit that's going to form without a shift in identity. And so what happens is, soon as it's like, I could go 3 months, I could go 6 months, but as soon as all of a sudden it's like, okay, I've been so fixated on willing myself into this new behavior that I've kind of dropped another ball over here. I couldn't juggle all 5 of them. So now I need to go fix this. But to do that, I'm going to actually use my willpower over here. Well, now the eye of Sauron, which is that focus, is like, got to go over here. And boom, I go straight back to my identity. Yeah. So my willpower is no longer being used there. And so I go back to what's default programming in that behavior. And so I agree that you can't will yourself long term. The other thing is change happens in a moment. And change happens in the moment, for me, the moment your identity changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to change the identity, what is our identity? It is literally the programming of what we believe about all of the pain and pleasure associated to all of the different things that are going on in this world.
Yeah. And what we like and what we don't like. I mean, that's really the whole game of the identity.
Yeah.
Daphne's a person that likes this. She's a person that doesn't like that.
Yeah.
And I spend my whole life just getting more of what I like and avoiding what I don't.
Exactly.
Have fun.
The crazy thing is it seems so simple, and it is. But if we only truly focused on understanding that about ourselves, and then look at our thoughts and our decisions and our behaviors of the past and what we're currently facing, and then our thoughts about the future, it's all based in what do I like or don't like, and what's going to bring me pain, and what's going to help me avoid pleasure or avoid pain and bring me pleasure, or the vice versa. It's so simple, but it explains so much.
It really does. And it becomes a crazy loop. Let me give you an example. I love people who are like, you need to just really do hard stuff. We've gotten too soft. And I'm like, well, okay, but now you've just become a person who likes hard stuff. It reminds me of, have you ever put two mirrors facing each other?
I've seen like the mirror houses where they do that, but and I've seen kind of the infinity kind of thing.
Yes. And it just becomes that. You cannot escape that sort of, anytime your identity wants to, it's just going to keep attaching to things.
Yep.
Right. So now you just become a person who likes hard stuff, doing hard stuff, climbing mountains, whatever. So
there was a phrase that I've tried to hop onto, and I'm trying to kind of evaluate and test the waters and see how much this could be true for me. Okay. And that is, the more I rest, the more I receive.
More I rest, the more I receive.
Which is the opposite of no pain, no gain, and hard work leads to success and all the other stuff. But I was approached with a different idea, that the more I rest, the more I receive. So far, it is such the opposite of what I used to have as an operating system of belief around work and difficulty and challenge and effort. And it's such the opposite of that I don't know that I've completely said, I'm just going to rest and just let everything flow to me. Yet, I have found myself more comfortable with rest. There's more margin in my life. And I do recognize that so far, things still flow as far as the good stuff in life with much less effort.
The word that came to me that I put up against rest is striving. Efforting.
Yeah.
That has a certain attachment to it.
Yeah.
Versus the idea of rest sort of being with, you're going to move, you're going to do stuff.
Absolutely.
I think that's the fear that people have, is like, if I completely become satisfied, content with what's going on, that this is enough, that I am enough, just as I am right now, that I will just stop doing stuff. And I just don't see that as your body is going to make you move at some point.
Well, exactly. And so I'll give a perfect example of this. So you and I were talking, one of the things I recently got into is amateur radio. Yeah. I got my technician license a month ago, and I just studied for, over the past week, my general license. I intentionally put in about 20 hours this week of study into my general license. Now, that study was a lot of work. It was a lot of even effort, but it was incredibly restful for me because it was in alignment with what I desire to do rather than what I felt like I had. There's nobody out there saying, Cliff, you're not going to succeed as a husband and a father or a business person unless you get your general amateur radio license upgrade.
This technician license isn't enough.
And so for me, while there were many things I could have done business-wise, that would be work and all the other stuff with those 20 hours, the interesting thing is I chose the rest, the thing that was more in alignment. And the fun thing is I still got some applications that came in for my next level mastermind, coaching, and some other people who have responded to call to actions and podcasts. It's like, wow, this is amazing. I got to rest. I got my cake, and I get to eat it too. So the more I rest, the more I rest, the more I receive. I'm not saying that it's an absolute hard-worn truth, but it's one. I'm trying to see how this dress looks on me.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Well,
that's my callback.
The counter is, we got to kill ourselves, right? I mean, that's sort of
that's exactly it.
Yeah, it's the modern, and I would make the argument that overutilized chronic capitalism is an exact opposite. To us having the lives that we want in some ways.
You know,
So
I
I'm
wish,
not going to get on that soapbox right now.
you know, so many people, they say what they want is that next thing, that next material thing, it's like, no, what you want is what you think you'll feel when you have it.
Yes.
And I think it's great.
feel it.
You can have it. There's nothing wrong with having it. But if we could only talk about how you could have the feelings that you think that you will have when you have it, if you could only learn how to feel those feelings now, such that you would be content whether you had it or not had it, it opens up an incredibly different experience on this planet.
Yes, it does. 100%. I think that's it. I don't know. We have 7 more steps.
Let's go.
But you're really nailing it. Okay, 3. All right.
What's number 3?
3, we start to understand how easily we can mask our feelings.
Tell me
and
more.
what's really going on with this. So for example, this is probably one of the easier ones in a sense, simpler ones to understand, maybe, but I can be feeling very afraid and it can look like anger.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, our feelings, not our thoughts. We can, thoughts do thoughts. When I talk about feelings, let me define what I mean. I'm talking about true sensations occurring in and on our body, and we label them.
Yes.
In a certain way. So the core 5, anger, fear, joy, sadness, and sexual feelings, creative energy. And so I can mask those and sort of mislead myself and definitely mislead others. For example, I've never brought this one up, but this is probably a good one for me. I could use humor very easily, which isn't necessarily an emotion per se, but I could use humor to override my sadness. Make a joke, which has a place, I think, to lighten a mood. Nevertheless, I would do it unconsciously. So not allowing myself to feel sadness, I could make it look a certain way, or not allowing myself to feel anger, or for women in particular, covering up anger by looking sad. So starting to cry when underneath what I'm really experiencing is anger.
Gotcha.
And all of it's, there's, ranges of all of these. I just am using large buckets here for the sake of description. So we can start to understand that we can mask, we can hide our feelings from ourselves and from others and lose out on those energies.
So with that understanding of what masking our emotions
And I'll give another example too.
Okay. I
can become defensive in the face of feedback. That's a really good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up for me with the first way that you explained it is that the masking doesn't always have to be on the taking a negative thing and trying to hide it with some sort of positive. But actually, I've seen somebody talk about the fact that sometimes we experience excitement, and the physical sensation in our body is almost identical to that of fear.
Yes.
And sometimes we think that what we're experiencing is fear, but if you and by the way, all of a sudden if you attach to a fearful thought and you're having that physical sensation, it's like I'm absolutely afraid right now. And then all of a sudden, the more you say it and the more you tell others how much fear you have, you're just driving it in. When the initial excitement or the initial emotion that showed up in your body was actually one of excitement.
Yeah.
And you just weren't used to it. It's like, oh my gosh, I've been so dead inside for so long doing this thing. And to think about going and doing this new thing is so exciting. But the physical sensation feels a lot like anxiety or fear.
Yeah. Fritz Perls, who was a crazy Gestalt therapist, he said, fear is just excitement without the breath.
Oh, I love that.
I do too. Because when we are in a threatened state, and I think there's so much to unpack on this. I think our identities have a lot to do with this too. And I'm going to do something new, and I'm taking on like a new, it also, when we're having a novel experience, we're taking on something new, it is shifting what we believed about ourselves.
Yes.
And so the fear really can come up. So I love that statement, because what starts to happen in my experience when I breathe, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling these sensations in my body, and I start breathing through that, I get in touch with much more level of excitement than I do a rational fear pattern. Fear, I mean, there are rational, there are rational fears that we can have standing on the edge of a building, for example, right? There are rational ones, but most of what we experience in this modern world for most of us is not fear that is based on our physical being, dying.
Yeah. So when it comes to masking, how is a step when leading to wisdom and discerning wise choices for us? What do we need to know about masking? How does that relate to actually discerning wisdom?
So great. First and foremost, really coming back to our body. What you just described is exactly it. And most of us are very disembodied. We have not spent enough time with recognizing sensation, which takes, when we haven't done it, it does slow things down, in my experience, exponentially, to really get in touch with, wow, I notice my heart is racing, or I notice I have these, butterfly feelings in my stomach. I love that you brought up excitement. Sadness and joy, similar patterns happen in our bodies. If you've ever gone to a wedding, water starts coming out of your eyes. It's kind of strange. It would probably be more of an experience of joy or deep love, or however we want to describe it. And yet I also would have water come out of my eyes if I'm experiencing sadness.
Yeah. What comes up for me as a practical piece of advice that I would give in learning to apply understanding the emotions and the masking that could happen, getting to the source of what's going on internally, is a practice of yoga nidra.
Yeah.
Yoga nidra is amazing, and I'm certainly going to oversimplify it. And for anybody who's a yoga nidra instructor, feel free to email me all your comments about how I've got it completely wrong. But my very basic understanding of yoga nidra, one of the things I love about it is I'm laying back, I'm relaxing, and I'm taught to experience the sensation, feel the tingling at the top of my foot. Mm-hmm. All right. And okay, now go and feel the sensation of my ankle. And it's like I can activate my consciousness in each of those places inside of my body.
Yes.
And it's so funny. It's like, you talk about your heart is racing. One of the interesting things is this, like, okay, now I want you to focus your attention on your heartbeat until you actually kind of feel or hear the beat of your heart just going through the vibrations of your bones. It's like, this is amazing. There's all kinds of stuff happening inside of here.
So many.
Yes.
And enjoyable. I think this is, we're going to get to the cognitive emotional loop here in a second. I think it's number 5, and you started to bring it up, that my heartbeat increases many times in a day when I'm exercising. So you can say something to me and my heart rate increases and I don't like it. I can exercise and my heart rate increases and doesn't bother me. I can have sex and my heart rate increases and I enjoy it. It's sort of funny.
Yeah.
But in certain instances, we suddenly decide that we don't like that feeling, that sensation, right? So yes, I love the yoga nidra. There's also the body scan meditation is very good. That's been taught for, again, thousands and thousands of years. So I think that's a very good practical suggestion. So
look at that. So, ancient psychology brought to the present.
There it is. Boom. Boom.
Brought to our discussion of modern wisdom.
Either way. We like it all. Okay. 4, recognize that we misinterpret what someone meant from what someone did or said sometimes, especially when we're tired, thirsty, and hungry. We haven't taken care of ourselves.
You mean we make assumptions about what people mean?
So many.
Well, here's my weekly callback.
Okay.
Are you ready? The 4 agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz.
I don't know how I didn't see that coming.
Don't make assumptions about what people mean. Hey.
Yeah. It's helpful not to do that. But we do. And what I'm really calling out here is we especially do when we haven't taken care of ourselves. And, I'm going to the body part of not taking care of ourselves because I think it's very practical and we skip over it all the time. There's also the part where we have said yes way too much and we haven't taken care of ourselves.
What are the questions that you're supposed to ask before you respond to something? Am I angry, or no, am I hungry? Am I tired? And what's the other one?
I say thirsty because I think
Okay.
thirst and hunger kind of can run together. Am I
Okay.
thirsty? Am I hungry? Am I tired? I think those three are great. There's more.
Yeah.
There's one more, I think.
Am I tired?
Yeah. Am I tired?
Is that the other one? I think
Yeah.
I think that's the other one. Am I tired? Anyway,
Yeah.
those are good questions to ask
Yes.
in my mind when we get into discerning a wise choice. It's like one of the things, it's like, listen, I am too tired right now
Yes.
to really come to any kind of decision about this.
Yeah.
And the best thing I can do, let me sleep on it.
Yes. Yes. I think again, wise response in the moment, right? Instead of feeling like there has to be a decision. Most things don't require an immediate decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Number 5. This is the cognitive emotional loop. This is what you were pointing to. We recognize the difference between a thought / story. I'm going to put them together.
Okay.
Thought, story, and a feeling. And that the two can work together.
Tell me more.
Okay. So you say something. I don't know what you would say to me. You say something. I have thoughts about that.
Daphne, that dress looks great on you.
Thank you. Well, that would feel really good. I would I would be like, oh, Cliff, really?
Okay. Daphne, are you wearing that dress to the performance?
There we go. Now it's personal, right? And I tell myself this, here come the thoughts. Oh my gosh, he thinks I look horrible.
No, I was just asking if you were wearing that color because it blends in and almost like you can't even see the instrument that you're going to be holding.
Yeah,
that was the reason why I asked the question. Are you wearing that dress?
Well, when you say that dress, I mean, sort of like, well, what's wrong with me? I chose it. This is horrible. So now if I pay attention to the sensations in my body, I may feel my throat closing up a little bit. I may feel heat in my face. And what I start to recognize is that I've had a thought, and you're trying to explain it away as a reasonable guy would. And yet I'm all over here in story. And now my sensations in my body are coming up based on the story. And here's what's great. I go play my instrument and we go to the concert and it's great. And 4 days later, I bring it back up. Why did he say that? What is it about me that he doesn't like? I don't know why he'd be so insensitive. And I start the thread again, ruminating, and here come the sensations. So these things can work together. And I think when the part of being wise is recognizing when that loop starts and that we might be playing. Now, I mean, we'll talk about ways to deal with that, but I think that's one of the steps.
Yeah. One of the questions that I would give myself when thinking about making a wise decision as it comes to this point, this step that we're discussing here, is what is the story or what is the narrative that's going on inside of my head? Yes.
100%. And this, I'll do a callback to Byron Katie's work, right? What are the stories we're telling ourselves? Is it true? Can
you absolutely know for certain that is true?
Who do you become when you have that thought? How do you react? That's my favorite of the four questions. When I have the thought that Cliff doesn't like my dress, I also known as he doesn't like me, because I'm a direct reflection of who I am as a person. Has everything to do with this dress. Yeah. Oh, so who do I become when I believe that? Right. And then who would I be if I didn't have that story?
Yeah.
That's my favorite. So yes. So just understanding really the distinction between a thought and a feeling. I had to learn that, and they're not the same. And that's why I made that, gave that definition before.
All right. Where are we? Are we on number 5 or 6?
5. Now? Yeah. No, we're on number 6.
Number 6.
Yeah. I like this one. Give up on the romantic ideals set up by Romanticism in the 18th century. So this is a little historical context. I was throwing some things out about this, which the romantic period was in a very much in a reaction to us moving into more modern times.
Okay.
People were starting to go, not quite, we weren't in the industrial age, but they were starting to leave farming a little bit. We were starting to figure, technologies, all these sorts of things were happening in the late 1800s. And so people started to hold on to the ideas of keep your childlike wonder, rebel, fight against, push against. There's a poet who wrote about this. Baudelaire is his name. And he wrote about the flaneur, that's spelled Flaneur. And it was just a guy who, and this got held up very much as sort of, this is who we should be, who just wanders the streets and just talks to people, doesn't really have a job. And this was set up as an ideal. And so the romantic period really came to the fore. And we can kind of hold on to some of these ideals. And I think this is some of letting what we were talking about earlier, and what you were saying about rest, right? If I rest, then I can be more likely to receive, which I think is very wise. At the same time that we recognize, we're not saying like throw out everything and do nothing all day. So I think pushing back against this a little bit, it also ruined love. And so I wanted to specifically call this out as it pertains to relationships. It set up this ideal that you're going to find the exact person and live happily ever after, and your relationship will be perfect.
So what was the thinking before that?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. And again, I'm not advocating for this either, but relationships were, you really stayed within your own bloodline. You stayed within your own, if you were born a farmer, you stayed a farmer. It's sort of your path was chosen for you in a lot of ways. I'm not advocating for that. What I am calling out is that we must be mindful about what was lost, because now it's all on you. Now you can meet your soulmate, and you're going to have a wonderful relationship. And by the way, if you don't, then there's something kind of wrong with you.
I think that's the danger side of that thought, is that you'll find that one person and you'll be heavily, happily ever after and all this other stuff. Because I have seen so many people who have lost their identity and experience a lot of suffering as a result of, for the last 20 years, I've invested everything to being a wife and a mother. And now, and as far as I was concerned, that's what I always wanted since I was a kid, because that was the picture and the dream and the goal. And I had achieved it. I had done it for 20 years. And then all of a sudden the husband goes and cheats, and there's a divorce and all this, and not to mention the fact that between the cheating and the divorce, there's a 3-year period where she's trying to do everything that says, we can make this work, because I can't let go of this. This is what this is supposed to be. We're supposed to always be together.
Yeah. And if it's not perfect, if it doesn't look like this romanticized ideal of a relationship, then it's really not that. It doesn't count. It should look a certain way.
That's the other thing is like, unless we're always lovey-dovey, super encouraging, if we get into fight, it's like, no, we can't get into fights. These are the problems with the over romanticized kind of ideas of what life could be and should be.
Yeah. And how you choose that person solely based on instinct. Like there's no method to doing it. So yes. So what came out of this one for me, and understanding sort of some of the waters in which we're swimming, which is why I pull on some of these things like I do. I just think it's helpful to know where certain ideas have even come from. Like, where do we get this idea about relationships? And to let go of some of what I think comes out of that is this belief in perfection, and letting go of that and getting in touch with good enough, which can sound a bit kind of reducing life a little bit, I think, but there's a wisdom in that. Like, this is good enough. Like, I am happy. I don't need to keep comparing myself to some ideal.
Yeah.
So, wisdom. Okay. 7. We recognize that we're going to come back to this one here. We're pointing to how much the state of our bodies influences our mind and our feelings.
Oh, yeah. I think we've covered that adequately, but it's definitely an important thing to be consciously aware of, is that the state of our body, absolutely, our mind it's energized. It's given its energy from the actual physical state of our body. Yes. In fact, the creative aspect in connection to the creative part of our mind is inaccessible to us in a panicked, life-threatening situation.
Yes, it is. And in particular, I want to zero in on this one, just because we do
or
this
even
pretty
perceived life-threatening. Life-threatening.
Or so that is happening every minute. And I wanted to zero in on this one because we do this really well, typically with babies.
Okay.
You know, the baby's crying. You've had children. I don't have children, but you have children. When the baby was crying, you went through a checklist, right?
Mhm.
Are they hungry? Do they need a nap? Parents, you know, who are dialed in with their kids, they know if the kid's about 2 or 3 years old, they've been running around all day, lots of stimulus, they've been going, they know if that kid doesn't get a nap.
Yep.
It's like their greatest panic is that the kid doesn't get a nap.
Yes.
And yet for some reason, because our bodies get bigger, we decide,
We stop thinking about that stuff.
yeah, none of it's relevant. Okay.
Number 8.
8, we recognize the benefit of the space between our reaction and words that may want to come out of our mouth.
Margin. Response instead of reaction.
Yes. Yes. Which we've talked about with, we've talked about that before. 9.
Wait, real quick.
Yeah.
The number of times I've written incredibly lengthy email responses filled with so much vitriol. And the hovering over the send button. And then thankfully, Jiminy Cricket's like, don't do it. Go take a nap.
Do not hit send. Don't.
And of course, there are so many people that you hit the send button, and finally Google had to give us the option to, it's like, okay, I got a countdown timer, 10 seconds. You got 10 seconds to undo that, baby.
Yeah. Do you know one of my favorite ways is to learn about when I get annoyed, frustrated, all those sorts of moments?
Tell me.
I love to journal. I journal it.
Oh, I love journaling.
I journal every morning, but in particular, if I get really ramped up, I love to journal it. And then I leave it sit. And I go back and read it 4 days later. It's so great.
Yes.
I get so in touch with what
Who wrote that? Who wrote that? No, what was that person thinking?
Exactly. Which one of me was ramped up about that?
That scenario is like what is it? Inside Out, the movie Inside Out.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just the whole, which one's at the console right now?
Yes. It's so good. Okay. Number 9. We hold our victories and failures in life very lightly, and we do the same with others.
Okay.
And what this is all about is just recognizing that, well, it's letting go of a bit of being a snob, but it's recognizing that people's worth and the value that they have is not based on their success or their losses. It isn't based on what they do. And we're all a little bit vulnerable to luck, to things just happening like they happen. For example, we were going to do the show this morning, 25 minutes sooner than we had planned. I come in my office, my beautiful Rode podcaster unit fried. Must have gotten hit by lightning or something. So, how I respond to that really matters. Nevertheless, it has nothing to do with me as a person.
Right.
Right. And so when people have success, when they have failures, we start to see past those in a lot of ways that it has nothing really to do with who they are as human beings.
Yeah.
But again, a little bit of the romantic period says that it does.
So what I gather out of this is when we think about this as it relates to experiencing more wise decisions and ways of experiencing life, is to hold our successes and our failures lightly, meaning that it's to let go, be able to say, listen, if things don't go according to our expectations, let's just drop the expectation and recognize it's like, okay, it is what it is.
Yes.
But now what do I desire to feel, and how do I desire to respond as a result? And whereas it's like, oh no, I had to pass that, and I can't believe I didn't pass. And then you're holding on to what you thought you were going to have. It's like, no, it's like, how could, and you ruminate.
Yes.
That causes a lot of that may not be wise.
Yeah. And just because you've had some success it has nothing to do with who you are as a human being.
That's the other thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I am worthy. Do you know how many people I will be worthy of other people's attention if I go get this certification, this credit?
Yes.
It's like people look up to me because one person said to me, they said, "Hey Cliff, I want you to help me drop weight. I just have this feeling like if I could just drop 60, 70 pounds, I'll be credible enough to get on a stage.
Ay.
And I'm like, I can definitely help you drop the weight. There's no doubt in my mind I can help you overcome the behavioral patterns, but not until we address the fact that you need to understand why you're not a success on a stage right now, or why you feel like you can't be a success on a stage now. Because I'm telling you, there's far too much evidence contrary to that point, other than the story and narrative in your mind.
That's really good. And that you're worthy to be on a stage.
Yes.
Regardless. Yeah. You have something to share. Yes. That's very good. Very good example. Circumstances change, in other words. Okay. 10.
Yay!
We're on number 10. You recognize that most of your worst behavior and that of others is driven by fear. Driven by fear. And everything in our heads and theirs can only be expressed with the most calm words, which creates two diametrically opposed actions.
Okay.
So I'm in fear. I'm wanting to talk, but my words are not going to come out very calmly. They're going to come out probably less than calm. And when we can see that in another person, it can, when we recognize that that's what's happening. I mean, again, I'll come back to compassion, but that's where it can be very helpful. And to recognize that when we're doing that, to have some compassion, if we find ourselves doing that, to have some compassion for ourselves, that it's probably fear talking, and that we can really give ourselves a moment and be gentle with ourselves as much as we can with others. The whole point of this one is that oftentimes when people are just really off the rails, there's some fear underneath it that's driving that behavior.
Gotcha. So what is the practical way that might show up when it comes to our decision to lead, to experience and embrace and have more wisdom?
Yeah. In this example, for me, it's breathing.
Okay.
And when I see it in somebody else, it's also breathing and recognizing there may be a moment of needing to give a break, kind of separating in some way, or just pausing. I mean, I've done this with me when I was leading teams. Wow, it sounds like this is very important to you. And let's just take a minute to take a breath here, or let's revisit this, later today, or revisit it tomorrow morning, to give some space. So that those reactions, because people are going into a reaction, I would be going into a reaction, that those reactions can get a minute to dissipate. Yeah. So taking a breath is a really good way to manage that.
Breath is definitely one. For me, when I find myself afraid, one of the things that I like to do is the breathing meditation. I like the journaling. The other thing is to find other people who are not so attached to the immediate outcomes of whatever it is I'm contemplating or that I've just experienced, and get an outside perspective from somebody that I trust.
Yes, from somebody a trusted advisor.
A trusted advisor.
Yeah, so good to have those. So, and then the bonus one is just learn the path of letting go over and over. When you were at the top of the show and you brought up ancient psychology and ancient wisdom, or all the wisdoms, modern psychology, I think that's really it.
Wu Wei.
All of it. Yeah. Wu Wei. Yes. Wu Wei. Say a little bit more about Wu Wei.
Well, Wu Wei is going with the flow, understanding that things may or may not, we may have preferences, and some things may go along with how we anticipate and how we desire. And if so, Wu Wei, go with the flow. It's like, I'm not going to fight against what is.
Yeah.
At the same time, when my preferences are not met, and I get unexpected or undesirable or inconvenient situations and circumstances, I'm not going to fight against what is. I'm just going to accept and embrace that this is what life is. One of the things in the Byron Katie work that I so appreciated is my belief is that this person should not have done this.
Yes.
Well,
or they should be doing X.
Or they should be doing something that they're not doing. And whenever we say somebody should or should not be have done something, the reality is if they did it, then they should have done it because
they did.
Because they did it. It's Wu Wei.
I love it. How do we know what reality is? because that's what happened.
And by the way, I recognize that I'm completely oversimplifying the concept of Wu Wei as well.
Yeah, sure.
It's my way of understanding the non-reaction to life. It's like I'm going to react through non-reaction. I'm going to embrace what is.
Yes. And that's what Byron Katie even says, loving what is. And I also, though, I heard her say this in one of her talks with somebody. She was working with one of her clients, and she's like, well, you know, and she was pointing towards having preferences, which of course, have preferences all day long. That's great.
Oh yeah.
You can always campaign. That's what she said. You can always campaign, but you don't get to control. And as this person was working through, what the shoulds, really being able to see that. So yeah, you can get with the isness of it. That's the first step in the acceptance of it. You can always campaign, and there is the path of letting go. And you may even get less interested in campaigning as you do so.
Yeah.
All right. Those are the 10 steps plus a bonus.
I love it. Daphne, it's always so much fun to see what you come up with for our topics and our outlines. And there's a lot of wisdom in what you've shared today. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And you're so fun to play with. And I also appreciate how, I'll come up with the topics and the outlines, and you really stay true to I'm not going to read too much into this. I'm just going to respond. It's really fun. It's really fun. Yeah,
I love it.
So thank you.
What's your call to action this week?
My call to action is to join me on Substack. I've had this call to action a couple times. In particular, there's a post that is going to come out tomorrow. I post every other week on there. My writing is really about the intersection of work and kind of our modern times, a lot of the things we've been talking about on the show, and how we come to understanding our work in the world and navigating, if you're working in an organization, navigating that particular context in that world, and bringing the transformational thoughts to that. How we relate to these things. How do we relate to working in, being the person who's the president? How do we relate to leadership? How do we relate to all of the time and money and the energy we give to that and the other parts of our life? So that's what I'm really interested in writing about. And I'll have another post out tomorrow.
Excellent.
Because it's every other week. So that's a little provocative. So, people will read it, see what they think.
And link to sign up will be in the show notes.
Yes, always in the show notes.
Awesome.
And how about you, Cliff?
My call to action is for those who are full-time, self-employed. You're a business owner, and maybe you've been trying to go through this entrepreneurial journey all on your own, taking the weight of all the decisions that basically not only impact you, but your clients, your customers, or even if you have a team, all of the other people all down the line, not to mention the fact that how every single decision you make impacts your family if you're married. If you do not have a mastermind group alliance, you don't know what you're missing, where you could actually meet together with other business owners who have lots of education, lots of experience, many different skills, talents, and abilities, and lots of resources, where every single week we come together and share all that we have to offer to the benefit of everyone else. And in fact, any decision that you're facing, you might think, oh, I know exactly what to do. Only to realize that, if I would have just let 2 or 3 other people hear my ideas, maybe I might have heard some other perspectives or perceptions other than my own about what is the right thing to do here. And not necessarily that we're right or wrong. It's just that it's more information to work with, and it's from other people who do life at your level. So if you are a full-time self-employed business owner, I would love to invite you to check out the Next Level Mastermind over at nextlevelmastermind.info. That's not .com. It's nextlevelmastermind.info, because that's where you're going to get the information for the Next Level Mastermind.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, just put it in the show notes. It'll be just click on the link.
Click on the link. All right, well, we'll do it.
All right, until next time, Daphne and I encourage you to choose more wisdom in your adventure.
And choose your own adventure.